Great, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Matt Hauk with Intake Health. I'm joined today by Derek Lawrance. Derek is currently an athletic trainer for the U.S. men's national soccer team, fresh off a trip to the Qatar World Cup, getting settled in back in the new year. Derek, thank you for joining us. I'm going to let the viewers know, you spent quite a few years in soccer in particular, currently with the men's national team, but for the decade prior to that, an athletic trainer in the MLS, starting way back when with Chivas USA, which I'm sure there's a couple players still in the league today that could say that they wore the stripes down there. But then most recently in MLS was the director of health and performance for the San Jose Earthquake. Prior to that, you worked collegiately in athletic training, so quite a bit of experience there. Derek, interestingly enough, also holds his doctorate in athletic training, which I'm looking forward to diving in a little bit to that. Derek, thank you for joining. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm really excited to be here and chat a little bit. And we've been talking for months, it seems, just going back and forth on a few things here and there, and even about personal lives and how everything's going. But it's nice to finally connect this way and have a good little chat.
It's kicking off 2023 in the right vein. Speaking of 2023, you had a pretty huge 2022 with the U.S. men's national team in particular. Qualification, which was so closely followed, the World Cup itself, which was it seemed like theatrics from start to finish, obviously for us in the USA, pulling for Team USA. Can we talk about the World Cup for a little bit? Like, an amazing experience. Sure. I know as a fan and just supporting yourself from afar and obviously supporting the team from afar. Talk to me specifically first about your role with the men's national team. What do you do?
Yeah, my whole start with the national team came about, when I was leaving San Jose Earthquakes, 2021 at the end of that. And there was an opportunity to come on board with the men's national team towards the end of 21. An old good friend of mine, Lawrance, who's the head athletic trainer, was the head athletic trainer for the men's national team, really had tried to get me in camp at some point throughout my years, still at San Jose when he was there. And so something I always wanted to do, because as an athletic trainer in professional soccer, it does work for the men's national team. If you want to be at the top of the top, that's where your goals are going to be, right? So fortunate enough for me, opportunity came and I was able to make the most of it. And even more so, because originally it was just going to be a PRN move and just work a camp or two. But there were certain kind of dominoes that fell that allowed me to stay on for the entire year. And looking down that year, looking down, you knew ultimately there's a World Cup possibility. And so that was something, I was going to jump on for sure. I just had to make sure that it all worked out for myself and my family. So that was an opportunity I really was happy about. So fast forward a little bit and rolled to, kind of the quote unquote full-time assistant athletic trainer. So I was involved with the day-to-day in between camps, Ron, meetings with the staff on a weekly basis, meetings with the performance department on a weekly basis, and then for the most part, just monitoring players. So as an athletic trainer, that was mainly the big roles that I had. And then during camps, just medical services with a couple other members of the athletic training staff throughout each camp, and traveled across the world. And that's always a nice thing when you really enjoy travel and seeing different parts of the world. It's even better when you get to do it as part of a team like that. So I was really appreciative of that, and just made the most of my role as an athletic trainer with them, and got to I hop tails of the national team a little bit this past year and see it out to Qatar. So that was pretty awesome.
There's so much that I want to dive into about workflow, day-to-day stuff, not just boots on the ground, but all the work that you guys had to do in build up and preparation. You are connected with a pool of players across the globe who are out playing for their respective clubs. Can you talk a little bit about, just in general, the staff's approach to, great, we've qualified, we know when this thing's going to happen, we've got our travel plan, we've identified the hotel resort we'll be at, we know where our training grounds will be, we know what we want to get there. Can you share just a little bit about the experience of how you as a health and performance staff, and particularly from your standpoint, how you were connecting with players and teams as they were transitioning out of the start of their club season or the end of their club season with MLS, and getting them ready and everybody on the same page about where all the players were at as they were headed to camp in Qatar?
Yeah, perfect. No, I mean, the biggest thing is, like you mentioned, the pool of players. And it comes, we took a roster of 26 players to the team, to the World Cup. The pool of players is 4 or 5 times that. And so that's where the biggest challenge throughout the periods leading into each camp and then planning into the World Cup. It's just monitoring players. And you're like, okay, so how do you monitor players from so far away? And you're right, it may seem kind of monotonous or something. It's, it's a process. And so the biggest thing is, most of the monitoring is done throughout the games. You're watching, you're paying attention to all the games on the weekends, and you have to set up. I mean, I was fortunate enough to find an app that allowed me to follow each player. And so now I'm very aware of every player, every time they start, every time they're subbed out, every time they're subbed in, if they miss a game, if they're subbed out for injuries, which is, the big red flag for us. And that's the biggest part. And then, with that is communication with clubs. And that's before, during, and after the camps. But the monitoring part is, just ensuring the health of the players are there. And along with the performance staff, it's also, they may be healthy, but are they playing? And if they're not playing, why are they not playing? And then discussions with performance coaches. And then that can lead into more discussions with the player and or the actual performance staff, or the health or the staff of each individual club. But that, it's not just that easy. You'd like to say, like, oh, we just bring them up, whatever. Some clubs be like, because we've actually built a relationship with many clubs around the world, because Steve Tashin, Ron Chenault, spearheaded this process throughout their last couple of years to build these relationships with individual clubs. And that starts when the national team players identified, if they're at a club, or players that have been in the pool for a long time. But these two gentlemen went after each club, just met with each performance staff and medical staff as best they could. As long as teams were willing to do it, they were meeting with them. And just to kind of show their faces, get to know them, and just say, hey, we're here to try to make this as seamless of a transition from club to country, from country to club. And that is very important to a lot of clubs. And you've been involved with the club before, and sometimes there's players that leave for national teams. You have no clue what their schedule's like, what they're doing, anything like that. They come back to you, and you're hoping that that type of stuff. But, our process as U.S. men's national team is being in constant contact as best we can around players. So if we notice a guy gets subbed out, and it may be because of an injury, we do our best to reach out to them most immediately and or the following day, and just try to have a conversation around it. And that way it shows that we're there to support what they're doing, but also just make sure that they know that we're around and making sure that our players are healthy. And that's very important. And we've had some, major clubs be very appreciative of that, because, some of these bigger clubs still have players that go to other countries that they don't hear anything from them. And they really, really like that. And it's been a good process. And it's just about building your network as well. And, Ron even made multiple trips to Europe to see players, throughout his time period, and to meet with the staff one-on-one, these type of things. So, kind of going back to my role, I was brought in also because of my MLS experience. And so because of 10 years or so in MLS, there's relationships that have been built and established and networked. So, for me, since I wasn't a full-time assistant trainer with the national team, I still was able to live here at home. But, my time was basically monitoring all the MLS players in the pool because of my relationships with the MLS guys. And so for me, firing off text messages, calls, as soon as I see something go down, because what we tell each team that we meet with during this process of building a relationship. If you see one of your players go down during one of our games with the national team, text us, call us. We'll talk to you as soon as we can. And what Ronald would always say is you'd be probably the third person to find out. The player, the doctors, head coach, and then the staff from the clubs. So that's kind of the big piece of what our roles are in that monitoring process building up to the World Cup.
You know what I appreciated the last bit of my time in MLS when the staff I was on in Portland, the existing staff there had great connectivity, obviously, to some of the guys with the national team here in the U.S. Obviously, everyone knows Darcy from all the years that he's been all over the world. But just the fact that, the things that we knew that we were sending off to the national club, very thorough, like the national team's using, very thorough in terms of, hey, here's the exact information we'd like to know. Obviously, we've been monitoring. We have a robust way of taking care of that. And it's only grown and grown in the years since then. But just knowing how much work goes into caring for players from your staff, like before they ever show up, you guys have already been putting in a ton of boot work. And that's even in the buildup. When you were in Qatar, you had even more on your plate in terms of, some of the day-to-day work that you were doing with players with the teams, but you had a whole other layer of responsibility for the tournament itself. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I was part of a staff of 5 athletic trainers, and there were 4 other performance coaches there. And it's just a big team effort. I mean, you can throw in the chiropractor and 2 other doctors are there. It's a good staff to take care of 26 players, so about 11 of us in this department that were taking care of the players. And it's necessary. It absolutely is necessary. And the biggest thing was just, if you looked at our schedule and how many hours that we'd have to put in to take care of these guys, I mean, it was a bit. And we had shifted our schedule to kind of match, because we kicked off 10 o'clock local time in Qatar. And not very typical for a lot of our players, although some guys, I think from La Liga, they kick off at 9 p.m. sometimes, 8 p.m. kickoffs, but 10 p.m. it's a different beast. And so when you're trying to do treatments to about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, like it can wear on you quite a bit. And so it's just a matter of picking each other up each day and making sure that we're all ready to go into action and help these guys. But as far as the roles, I guess what I would talk about is just how we as a group worked, to make sure that everything was going well with the players. And that started with some of the processes of, again, we're going back to like monitoring players. And I think a lot of the clubs can probably say that they do many of the same things, that you want to find out what's going on with the players. So we actually have a daily process that the players go through. And, if something comes up as a red flag, we do proper screen responses, is what we call it. So that moves from the performance guys to the medical staff. We review the players. If we get them, we check out their screen, everything's good. We let the performance guys know that, hey, everything's good. And then it can just also be communicated up towards the coaching staff as well. For the most part, there was never really there weren't any issues where screens popped up and we're like, this is an absolutely hard flag, like no one's practicing, right? But there are things that you just monitor and just make sure that guys are prepped and ready and can do the best that they can. And so that's just part of the process with the performance team or performance coaches as part of the performance staff. And then obviously the daily meetings, just reviewing each player, making sure everything's good to go for that. But going back to the players' clubs and the preparation coming into the World Cup, all that work that is done prior to is a big piece of it, because what we try to do is provide those players with the same equipment or pre-practice processes that they may have for themselves, because you got to remember these players are such a high level. A lot of them have their own routines, and we have to make sure that we're able to provide things that allow them to do those, or whether it's us being familiar with their preparation, or it's us being familiar with what type of manual therapy they prefer. Can we get certain modalities in to make sure that these guys feel like they're in their club? And again, that goes back to building those relationships and just knowing like, hey, this is what helps out with the players. And so that's kind of like our role as athletic trainers, to really make sure that everything is as seamless as possible, as I mentioned before. But beyond being an athletic working performance staff, for me personally, one of my main roles during the games, like say, because there's 5 of us, right? Athletic are on the field, so what are the other 3 doing, right? And my role was to work as a medical spotter from up top. So my seat was actually the very last row, but great view, 50, I guess you could say midfield, last row, and I had a monitoring station, very similar to a Hawkeye medical review station that MLS uses, and we may talk about that later. But it's just basically a monitor that gives me access to every single camera angle that the TV has access to.
Wow.
And then what I'm able to do is at any point that a player goes down, I can slowly rewind. I can rewind it, stop it. I can zoom in, zoom out, check in on different angles, and really find out, was there a mechanism that, if there was an injury, was there a mechanism? And I can relay that information to Ron. He's going out on the field. So Ron and Dr. Chempes, who went out there on the field, or Dr. Patterson, Dr. Mandelbaum, when they go on the field, I'd be able to speak to them and say, hey, it does look like, let's just say, direct contact to the medial side of the ankle. So there's a possible, lateral ankle sprain, something like that. But it was very interesting to be up there and have that view and that ability to do that, and just the streamline of communication, because one of the things too is by the time they get out to the player, more than likely I have the image, out there. So within 30 seconds, I can have an image or a video of like what's going on. And so this kind of streamlines the communication process when they're with the player.
You want to talk about just how important athletic trainers are, not just the day-to-day work that you're doing to help get that athlete as ready as they can to perform, help them recoup and reboot. This week, obviously, it's hammered home that athletic trainers are frontline healthcare in so many ways, and not just the boots on the ground on the field, but additionally, they have specialists like yourself who are doing what you do, not just through the World Cup. It's something that you'll have done in the MLS, will continue doing the MLS, is be those crucial extra eyes in the sky for any possible injury. Like you're just saying, oh, maybe it's just, I'm going to say just a mechanism of, direct contact to the ankle, or maybe it's deciphering something that happened with the knee. Obviously, head contact is pretty important. That's a whole separate classification, but just the work that athletic trainers are doing. I don't know if many people realize just how expansive, particularly non-medical and performance type staff, or just the general fan, don't realize like how many specialized eyes it takes to properly care and spot what's going on. Whether it's the World Cup, the upcoming 2023 MLS or NWSL season, there's so much work that you're specialized and focused in. And I did want to touch on that a little bit about this is something that you'll be continuing in MLS this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the nice things that, after spending a good portion of career, if not most of all of it in MLS, is building those relationships. And, fortunate enough for me, when I stepped away, there was an opportunity with MLS to work as a concussion spotter. And so my skill set that I've developed over the past year, well, you could say over the many years of working in athletic training, can transition into now as a medical spotter. And, a lot of people hear about the NFL concussion spotters that send the players into the blue tent, independent neurologists, these type of things. So MLS has taken a little bit of that and has created their own concussion spotting program. And, it's been great for me because I get to watch MLS, which I've always enjoyed doing. I wouldn't have worked it for that long if I didn't. And, my job is to, again, work a monitor. I get all the camera angles, same thing from from the World Cup, and to be in direct contact with a venue medical doctor that's right there at midfield for all these for the head injuries. And again, it's great for the league to have. It's great for the medical professionals that are on the field. It's great for the doctors there. And I'm happy that I'm able to be a part of it because I enjoy trying to take people, and if that's one other way I can do it, it's great. And the other thing that helps out is just my experience in that world, my conversations with the doctors on the field. I don't want to say like I get a lot more respect, but there's a little bit more to it because of my experience, right? And so usually when I contact the venue medical doctors, it's, hey, I'm Derek Lawrence, former head athletic trainer for San Jose Earthquakes, spotted, just right there to try to establish a point like, hey, I've been there with you on the sidelines, so I know how these situations can come about. And just, the conversations just make it a little bit easier. And so the communication that goes back and forth when there is a potential head injury just makes it a lot easier. And then just the experience of being around the sport and understanding the mechanisms a bit better, and then you can really kind of figure out the potential head injuries and the absolutely that's not a head injury. It looks like they're faking it, but you keep that to yourself and you just say, oh, there's no contact to the head, and then just leave it at that, and you try to move on. But it's a great program. The players should definitely feel a lot more safe with that program going on, because again, when there's a head injury, by the time the athletic trainer is able to have that evaluation, the spotter should be able to show the venue medical doctor the video. So we're talking within a minute that a video can be pulled up, reviewed, and seen. And athletic trainers are given just about 3 minutes minimum, it should be, to evaluate a head injury on the field. So within that time, like, the video is seen, and that's the goal. And we're always trying to get better. We all see that there's some mistakes that are being made. And there's been some times even during my games that might be mistakes here. And you just try to look back on the video. And that, again, that's the other good thing is our video recordings and our videos and our conversations are recorded. And so we have a monthly meeting as concussion spotters to review that process, make sure, like, does everybody understand what may have gone wrong here? How can we make it better? And just for learning process in the future. But it's awesome. It really is.
One thing I'd like to touch on quickly, you're spotting things that happen on the field. You see an injury happen on the field. And no matter how much time and effort a health and performance staff put in, there are some things that are just going to happen from an injury standpoint that we don't have magic predictive ability about yet, supposedly. That's a whole different conversation for many, many people to come up on here and sling mud at each other. However, you've been boots on the ground. You've been in tough, stressful team environments. World Cup, I think, is a great example. Talk about the most focused and competitive event for the side of our sport is the World Cup, the group stage. You're playing a cadence every several days. It's a little bit tighter than a normal league schedule. Every match counts. There's no skip overs. Every match is so important.
Mm-hmm.
That probably weighs on players, in addition to the physical demands, the hyper competitiveness, the psychological arousal that goes, and guys all of a sudden give what they couldn't give before. And by the way, they got to turn around in 4 or 5 days and do it again. Recovery becomes super important. And there's a lot of tools that practitioners across sport use to help monitor performance outputs and then get valuable information about recovery. But at what point does the art of what you do come in to say, I don't think this guy wants to be bothered by a certain test or monitor today, or this is really going to be tough. I don't know what I'm going to get out of him. That can happen in a normal league. Like, obviously the World Cup is like the most heightened focus of it. Whether it's the World Cup or just in a general sense of some of the most intensive periods that you've gone through, you as the practitioner with the relationship with the athlete and the knowledge of the team setting, how do you navigate that and saying, do I really need to force this guy to do these 2 or 3 screens? Or how do I get to convince him if a mind space isn't good, maybe it's a contract issue, a spouse issue, or it's oh my gosh, we have to win this game. What can you share on that regard in terms of how you approach different types of monitoring, sometimes technology, but where does the art come in for you?
Yeah. Big piece of it is just purely education and communication with the player. And let's just be honest, there's going to be some players that are just refuse to do things, and you're going to beat your head against a wall for 2 to 3 weeks about it. And sometimes there's a battle that you're just not going to win. There's only so much that you can control as yourself as a practitioner. But if you can get them to understand, how, why important, that's the biggest thing. And when you talk about different pieces of monitoring, I mean, I think every team is completely different on how they monitor. There might be teams that do absolutely no monitoring, right? There's going to be teams that do individual exercises or, screening process that I mentioned, like with the national team, but each team's going to have a different type of screening process. And you can see that with plenty of teams may have, the isometric testing each day. Some might have range of motion testing each day. And then some have hydration testing each day. These are all just ways to like look at, are these players able to perform at the top level and do it as close to 100% as possible? If you were to ever ask a player 100%, what's their response? I'm never 100%. Right. So we deal with that nonstop, but that's okay. And you try to start a lot of the screening process, using a phone with some sort of, screen questionnaire. And the questionnaires have always been interesting to me. We used to have like an extensive one when you first start out as a practitioner. You're like, yeah, we're going to get all these answers and we're going to make all these decisions and we're going to know perfect. And you ask a guy 10 questions every single day, and then you start to realize that response rate starts to go down, down, down. Or their responses are this. It's just a flat line because it's the same thing each day, and they're doing it just to do it. And that's pointless in my point of view. I hated that. And so for me, it was then going to have conversations with players like, okay, what is it about these questions you don't like? Or how can we come up with a better question that is going to get an honest response out of you and something that we can help you with, because that's what this is basically here for. It's not just for us to collect numbers, is what a lot of players are going to think. A lot of them think that us as athlete trainers, sports scientists, physical performance coaches are just there to collect numbers and then move on with it. So it's really, really about the education as to like why these numbers or screen responses are important, because we need to make sure that they're ready. And we want to be able to catch something if we can, as we go back to like predicting injuries and stuff. Like, yeah, it's very difficult to predict injuries. Again, that's another rabbit hole to go down a different day. But any information that you can get that may show a guy is slightly off, and if you're prepared for that, it's going to only help you as a clinician or coach, or whatever in your position, to treat them and be ready for that. And I think that's the biggest piece, is just really those hard conversations. Say like, it's for you. Let's make it about you, because ultimately you are the one that's going to be on the field. I'm not going to be on the field, but my job is, as a practitioner, is to make sure that I help you stay on the field, because I don't want you in my training room. If I don't have to do treatments every single day, I feel like I've done a great job. For me, I don't want people saying like, oh, really great manual therapist. It's like, okay, you've been on my table way too long to know that. Like, just be healthy. So part of the monitoring is just making guys are field as much as possible.
I think something that resonated with me about your response is that you have to know so that you can help get them as close to 100% as they're going to get. And that may only be 91%. There's the old adage that's been used frequently, is like, 99% fresh is not 100% injured. I butchered that a little bit, but the mindset is, just because they're not 100% fresh doesn't mean they can't go out there and crush it. Doesn't mean that they can't go out there and be resilient and perform well. And I think what I really struck with as well is that you're not just going out there to collect a bunch of data, throw a bunch of spreadsheets together, put it into your AMS. Like, yes, there is use for that, but the biggest use for that is action. Like, you have a whole, we're going to get into your education track in a moment, but you have a huge background of formal education and adheres to 15 plus years of experience working in this field as a practitioner. You know what information is critical, and most critically, you know what to act on and how to act to make progress in that area, whether it's some type of manual therapy, maybe it's a hydration status, a fed status, whatever it might be. You have, with this technology, it has to be about an action to take moving forward. And now that we've brought it up, you're going to have to toot your horn, or I'll toot your horn for you. In addition to everything you did in 2022, qualifying for the World Cup, going far, you finished your doctorate in athletic training. You got to tell me a little bit about that. I'm obviously, like, you know, there's DPTs out there. There's you know, other PhDs that you have, but can you help describe your program, your doctorate program in athletic training, where you did it, what were your goals, what was the process you went through, and where are you taking it moving forward?
Yeah, no, it's something that, you know, I never, believe me, that's master's program. I'm done with school. I don't need to do school. I'm done with that. But ironically, as someone who goes through this profession, you realize there's so much more to learn and so much more to understand. And then as you dive into professional athletics or any kind of athletics, there's just so much more out there, especially as an athletic trainer, that you can learn from multiple disciplines. And it's not just and it's big for an athlete to never just stay as an athletic trainer minded person. Like, you really need to open your mind and take a lot and work a lot with your strength and conditioning coaches, your sports science coaches, your nutritionists, your sports psychologists, because you take a little bit of that everywhere you go as an athletic trainer. So opportunity came up, you know, an old friend of mine and program director, Dr. Jeff Conan, who's now running the Florida International University DAT program, reached out to me and was like, hey, you know, do you have any interest in this? And it's just like, well, you know, I'm kind of busy. I'm working full time. I have a daughter on the way. You know, we welcomed a baby daughter in October of 2021. You know, prior, you know, so we knew that, like, we were trying to have, you know, we we're going to have a child. And so we had full-time job because I was at San Jose Earthquakes and had this, like, how am I supposed to fit in school with all this? And he's like, you'll make it work. Don't worry. I know you can do it. Okay, fine. I'll do it. But part of it, and a big part of it was what he told me about the program and just how it's a very open-minded program. And the big thing about it is it's supposed to help you as an athletic trainer really find ways to develop yourself outside of traditional athletic training. And that may be kind of for some athletic trainers to hear, but, you know, there are some schools, I think there's other DAT programs that are kind of clinically focused. I'm not going to call them clinical doctorates because they're not, because they still touch on many different areas. But, you know, I didn't take a anatomy class. I didn't take a recovery class or a rehab class within this program. This program was all about expanding your mind as an athletic trainer and really getting to the idea of, you know, what are big roles as an athletic trainer in this world? So is there a way for you to travel globally to work with international medical members? Is there become a better leader? So we had a leadership focus. There was an academic focus for scholarship and learning how to do more research and or find your way into an academic role. Since you're going to get a doctorate, you're going to be able to teach at a higher level. And then the biggest thing, and the other one was entrepreneurship. And that was kind of what kind of sparked my interest. I was like, oh, entrepreneurship, like, you know, you think that finding or creating your own business may be kind of interesting. And so this is a big thing for me. And, you know, the professors, the ad professors are all part of this group that, you know, are very big leaders. They're big globally and academically they're there, but also entrepreneurially. So that was very big to me. And so, you know, I dove in and, you know, the first semester, my ass a little bit because there's 3 classes on top of preseason. And so that was a lot of fun. And then it culminated in giving my final presentation for my doctorate program while I'm at Qatar in the hotel at like 11:30 p.m. at night. So to say that it was kind of easy, no, it wasn't. So it was a lot of work to get to that point for sure.
That is, you know, for people in the field who have gone beyond undergrad, gone through a formal like graduate master's program, they say the same thing that you and I say, like, well, I'm done with, like, hey, I'm done with school. Like, I love learning, but I'd like to learn and apply to take it that next level and totally expand the direction you're going towards. It's eye-opening because it's something that you and I spoke about a little bit is that you wanted to see about possibly connecting more dots beyond just, I'm going to use, say, quote unquote, traditional athletic training. You're opening up whole new avenues for yourself in regards to the relationship between athletic training and obviously like some of the allied health and performance departments, like such as sports science, for example. What are your thoughts, or do you have any initial goals or trains of thought or action that you want to pursue in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing. You might be able to see or hear, the IPT performance. This came about from my doctorate program, and this was me creating a business for myself and trying to develop ideas of how I can, get out of the traditional roles of athletic training, even though, yeah, I work with the national team and go into these traditional roles. That's okay. But what are the long-term goals for this, right? And so my goal was to draw from my experience as an athletic trainer, what I really enjoyed from other areas, and then try to figure out a way to, in a sense, go back and teach more athletic trainers. So the ultimate goal and what I want to be from my doctorate program is I want to go out and blend sport science with athletic training. And what does that mean? That means, a big thing for me that I learned from working in professional soccer was just the GPS monitoring. And what GPS has enabled practitioners from sports scientists, performance coaches, athletic trainers to do is unbelievable. And like how much that's come about. Gosh, it's probably 10 years old now. So it's relatively new still. And in the last 5 years is really ramped up, and the technology is getting cheaper. More people are getting access to it. But when you actually dive into sports or GPS, there's so much information out there, and you just get bogged down in it. And us as a staff at San Jose Earthquakes, was three athletic trainers, three athletic trainers, and one strength coach when we first got GPS. And none of us had experience in it, so it's just like, what do we do with this thing? And unfortunately, when we talk about like just collecting numbers for the sake of it, well, when you first started doing GPS, like you're collecting numbers for the sake of collecting numbers, because you need to figure out what these numbers are actually going to mean. And then once you figure that out from learning more, reading a lot more and just applying it, and then once you find out those little nuances, and you start to hear the phrases like the chronic load or the ratios, these type of things, and then you start to learn how to apply those. And I think the biggest piece that athletic trainers are missing is the ability to use this technology to their benefit when they're doing rehabilitation. It's not just about the monitoring process, right? So that's what your sports scientists or your performance coaches are mainly going to do. They're going to be monitoring a lot. So our roles as the medical providers, how can we get them back safely? But we always need to find a way to do it very efficiently and quickly. And when you have objective data to do that, it makes you as an athletic trainer that much better, because you can't sit there and tell me that without this technology, when you tell somebody to go run, you can't tell me what zones they're in. You can't tell me, did they get high speed distance? You might be able to estimate the distance that they're getting, but you're not going to know exacts. And just, how are you recording all that information? So the big thing for me from, my company is that's what I get into, and really try to hammer home how important it is for athletic trainers to really just open their minds and, learn as much as you can from sports scientists or performance coaches, because it's going to make you that much better of a practitioner for sure. And then not only is it going to make you better, it's also going to be probably the ability to move up into director roles. And that's the big thing that you see a lot of athletic trainers are probably missing out on, their roles. And that's because they may not understand sports science or sport technology or monitoring these type of processes. So it's really important for athletic trainers to know that. And so if I can get out there to the general population of athletic trainers, we're not talking, because professional athletic trainers, if you talk to the majority of the guys in MLS, guys and girls in MLS, they're going to know this stuff, no problem. But that's a lot of athletic trainers. There's like tens and thousands of athletic trainers that they're going to be exposed to this technology at some point. And if they're missing out on the ability to use it, then they're missing out on the ability to get better. And so that's what I really want to do with my business as I move forward.
I think the education part that IPT and your services will be providing to help elucidate, this is not the magic black box. This is what you do with this information. And by the way, look at all of the information that's here. This is critical context when you are applying information to maybe it's baseline screening and profiling, whatever testing, but then obviously all the work that the allied health medical performance staff is performing, because it's not just the GPS data in a nutshell. You all have huge information streams about manual testing, orthopedic testing, diagnoses, prognosis, and any other like movement screening that you already mentioned, any other performance, strength, or isokinetics. Like, there's so many pieces of information that have like huge medical importance and a huge body of research behind the validity of their application, or the strength of the validity of their application. It's almost it excites me that we are going to more appropriately apply and more thoroughly apply this technology across multiple staffs. So not just from the sports science side, but from sports science, athletic training, and performance for this physical realm that we operate in. And people use different versions of like the pillars of performance of physical, technical, tactical, and some version of social or cognitive or mental. There's many different versions of that four part, but from this physical realm, where we're tasked with physically preparing athletes to physically perform at a high level with consistently, so that they can execute technical skills and tactical outcomes. Like, we understand, like, this is our little box here, but man, we have such a deep understanding of this box, and we also know that we need to start understanding a lot more. I love the fact that that some of your goals for 2023 with IPT are going to help create a foundation of spreading that education throughout multiple staffs. So, speaking of 2023, kind of as a bookend, what are you most excited about for 2023 outside of the work that you're going to be starting with IPT?
Oh man, it's just, kind of expanding on that, to be honest with you, because getting away from, the training room world and just kind of seeing what else is out there. It really excites me to understand that athletes get out and do more. And that's what I'm really excited about this year, because I didn't know what I was going to do when I was leaving San Jose. And because of my school, which helped me create my business, it enabled me to land 3 contracts for 2022. So now I'm here, and I've got my 1 contract or 2 contracts right now. Actually, I still have all 3 of them right now. So it's like, but one's going to be over in a couple months. It's like, what am I going to do next? And because of this experience, it's really shown me that, like, I can definitely get out and do more. That's me, what I'm excited for personally. I've relocated to Southern California. I look forward to getting to the beach a lot more, and be welcoming a baby boy in May, and so being dad times 2. And the other big thing is I've been a stay-at-home dad for some of this time, and that's something that not many athletic trainers can do. And so I've been really appreciative of that process, and it's been pretty awesome. So I hope to get that going personally, and then just see what else is out there, and can't wait.
Terrific. Derek, thank you for carving out time. I'm glad we got to finally catch up post World Cup, post holiday season. Really appreciate you joining us here on the Intake Health Coaches Corner, as we're kind of calling it, and would love to have you back in the future as 2023 and IPT continue to ramp up.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Matt.